People ask me to talk about the difference between accountability and responsibility. Now, this takes a fairly long time to unpack this well, so I'm going to shorten it as much as I can. I'll start by saying this. In the English language, we use the two words very interchangeably. Many languages around the world don't have two different words, and I tell them that's a really good thing, right? So, however, to me, there are some important differences no matter what word you use. Sometimes I think, let's just choose two very different words to talk about this. Let's choose spot and dog instead of accountability and responsibility. So spot refers to the internal feeling of ownership, right? The internal ability to respond to whatever happens, right? Of course, this is what we're talking about in the work that we do with the responsibility process, and how when we're below the line, we feel like we are victims in that effect and have no power. And in the mental state of responsibility, we have amazing creativity and generativity, and it's the mental state of freedom, choice, and power, and we feel bigger than any problem and overcome anything. So spot is that whole system of what we do to generate our own sense of ownership, our own responsibility practice, and inspire others to do the same. Dog is about how we hold others to account for results or behavior or performance. In this system, in the dog system, we have performance reviews, the whole delegation system, we have goal setting, we have documentation, we have huge organizational systems designed by consultants to drive accountability into the organization, to drive dog into the organization. And they're very different. So one system operates completely inside, and it's a little difficult to access. So my life's work is about how do we make this system more accessible, more understandable? How do we create a language where we can talk about this system? Right? That's the spot system. The dog system is completely external to you. In other words, whether or not you are held to account isn't up to you. It's up to somebody else, right? And the system isn't necessarily fair, right? So I know that you've been held to account for stuff that you didn't do or wasn't fair, or wasn't right, or wasn't ethical, right? And I know you did other stuff that you should have been held to account for in a very positive, honoring, acknowledging way, and they didn't notice, right? So two different systems, one's outside of us, the other's inside of us. They're both pretty important, but what I find is that our organizational systems tend to rely way too much on the dog system. And the trouble with that is that we can create it in a way that's burdensome and over-controlling and actually drives responsibility down. Right? So there's a multi-billion-dollar dog industry out there that says we're going to drive accountability into your organization. And very often when that happens, what comes with it is fear. And when fear comes in, responsibility goes out. Now, my experience is that the reason that we tend to buy accountability systems is that they're hardware and software and documentation and branding and logos and templates and stuff that you can spend money on, and they promise better control. And it's difficult to buy a spot system or responsibility system because it's more amorphous, and it deals with people and humanity and culture and leadership, and it deals with individual interpretation. It's subjective. However, here's what I've learned. Responsibility trumps accountability every time. Every time. Right? If you have a low responsibility system, no amount of accountability system is going to drive responsibility in. And if you have a high responsibility system, a very lightweight accountability system will do just fine. So I think that's a reasonable overview about the difference between responsibility and accountability. I guess I'll leave with this one final thing. We've been trained as good workers to say, well, yes, I want to be held to account. Bunk. I don't want to be held to account. I don't want anybody to ever have to hold me to account. I am going to take 100% responsibility for signing up for what I do. I'm only going to do things that I enjoy and that I'm committed to doing. I've spent a lifetime turning my life towards being able to make decisions about doing things that I want to do. I realize that you may not feel like you're in a position of saying that, but if you start today, you will be in a position of saying that in a year or 2 or 3 or 5. If you don't start, you'll never be in a position of saying that. So I never want to be held to account because I'm going to be taking responsibility for my own performance, my own actions, my own agreements, my own communication, my own hours, my own results. Which means if anybody ever has to hold me to account, right, then I'm not taking responsibility.